Hello guys, welcome to our Saturday school session. To start off the lesson, we have 4 recap sessions that I would like you to focus on first. So what I would like you to do if you're watching the video is to pause the video and have a go at these questions within 10 minutes, and then you can just replay the video to check your answers, please. Right, so here are the answers of these questions. So the first one, second, third. So the second section I'm going to go through with you on the next slide to just explain as to what each step requires you to do in order for you to get full marks in the exam. The final section should be something quite straightforward for everyone. It's just simply substituting the x value into the function h. So to start off with the first question on your recap 2 section, I just want to remind everyone that this is something that we've done in September. We started doing these questions in September, and it is going to require you to do some cross multiplication. You're going to write down the ratio of cross multiplication because the ratios are equal to each other. You can just write down as a fraction as well. And then we are going to solve it to find out x. And that's going to allow us to be able to compare A to C and B to C, which will then be simplified down to 5 to 4 for the first question and 5 to 2 for the second question. So if we just start off with the first one, it is giving us the information that A to B to C is 9 to 4. So the A to B section is going to be this section here, which is from here to there, and B to C is this section here. So that means I need to write down A to B to C is equal to 9 to 4. So A to B is 7x minus 3, and B to C is 3x minus 1, which is equal to 9 to 4, which will then be written down as you can write it down as a fraction, and you can just stack them up and cross multiply. So I would usually stack them up and cross multiply. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write down 9 to 4 underneath here. So then I can do my cross multiplication. So this is going to be 4 times 7x minus 3 is equal to 9 times 3x minus 1. This will be a step for us now to show the examiner that we can expand the bracket. So you're going to need to show them that you are expanding the brackets by just either putting your arrows, or you can do the grid method. It's totally up to you. So 4 times 7 is going to give us 28x. 4 times 3 is going to be 12, and it's going to be a negative 12 because there is a negative and this was a positive 4. 9 times 3 is going to be 27x, and 9 times 1 is going to be 9, and we're going to make sure that we write down the negative sign there. So I'm just going to carry on next to it, guys, so then we have enough space to do the solving. So we have 28x take away 12 is equal to 27x minus 9. So what we know when we know about solving an equation, and we know that we need to always start from the smallest x first, because that's going to allow us to get rid of the smallest x. Therefore, we are going to end up with a positive x. So if I take away 27x from both sides, 27 being the smallest x, I will be left with 28x take away 27x is going to be x. Negative 12 will remain as negative 12, we're just going to take 12 away, and that is take away 9. So solving an equation again, remember we're just going to try and find out what x is. We need to add 12 as 12 is a negative, and add 12 to this side as well. So that's going to simplify. That's 0. So x is going to be 3. So 12 take away 9, you can think of it as, or negative 9 plus 12. So that's going to give you a positive 3. Now, the 2 sections they would like you to focus on are A to C and B to C. So that means whatever you found at the moment, which is x is equal to 3, will be substituted into these 2 expressions here, and then it will allow you to write it down as a ratio. So you've got 3 times 3 take away 1, 3 times 3 is 9, take away 1 is 8, and 3 squared plus 1, 3 squared is 9, plus 1 is 10. So if I write down A to C to B to C, it is going to be 10 to 8. The question is asking us to show that A to C to B to C is going to be the same as 5 to 4. So this simply means that you will need to show the examiner that you're simplifying these to end up with 5 to 4. So how do I simplify this? I know in order for me to get to 5, I'm going to half them, so that's the only number I can use. So that's going to be 5 to 4, and this is how you get full marks from this question. So let me go through the next one as well, so then you guys can either copy it down or you can do some recap on these type of questions, because these tend to come up quite often, whether it is a triangle question or a circle. So we have quite a bit of ratio questions in your GCSE, so there's a quite high chance that you might end up with something like this. Now, A to B to E to C is 2 to 1. A to B to C is 2 to 1. So if I write down A to B to C is 2 to 1, A to B is 6x, B to C is x plus 4, and that is equal to 2 to 1. We mentioned that we are going to stack them up, so that means we're just going to write it down like this. Cross multiplication will give you 1 times 6x is 6x, 2 times x plus 4 is going to be 2 times x, 2 times 4. You need to expand the bracket, so you're going to end up with 6x is equal to 2x plus 8. So if I carry on up here, 6x is equal to 2x plus 8. The smallest x at this stage is 2x, so we need to take away 2x from both sides because it's a positive. So that's simplified. 6x take away 2x is going to be 4x is equal to 8, divided by 4 to find out what x value is. X is therefore going to be 2. Now, A to C to B to C again is the section that they want us to focus on. So we're just going to substitute x into where the x is here. So x is 2, so we're going to write down to 2 plus 4 is going to be 6. 8 times 2 take away 1 is 15. So A to C to B to C in this case, therefore, I'm just going to be using therefore, A to C to B to C is going to be 15 to 6. They want us to go down to 5 to 2. That means we need to divide it by 3. So as soon as we show this to the examiner that we know we are going to be simplifying it down by doing the same thing to both sides. What we do on one side, we're going to do the same thing on the other side. But divided by 3, we end up with 5 to 2. And that's how we get full marks from this question. So today's lesson is going to be focusing on non-linear simultaneous equations. So by non-linear simultaneous equations, we are generally talking about a linear graph with a quadratic graph where you have 2 intersection points that are highlighted here, and the values of these 2 intersection points, which are the x and y axis, are the ones that we're trying to find out. Sometimes you might end up with an equation of a circle with a linear equation, or maybe sometimes you might end up with another quadratic where you will need to rearrange, factorize and solve, or rearrange, use the quadratic formula and solve. So this question is going to be our starting point when you start solving these kind of questions, or when you start learning about these questions. These are the types of questions that we start with. So what we know from this question is that we are given two functions where y is equal to x squared plus 1 and y is equal to x plus 3. So what we know about this is that the two y's, we can actually equate them. So we can say substituting equation 1 into equation 2 is going to help us to find out what x is going to be. So if I say x squared plus 1 is the same thing as x plus 3, because they are equal to each other, that will allow me to solve this and find out the x-axis. So it seems like it is going to be a quadratic because we can clearly see there is an x squared and there isn't an x squared on the other side. So what we need to do is, we know that the quadratic equations should be in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So we need to equate it to a 0. So what we are doing is we are taking x away from both sides to get rid of the x on the right hand side, and taking 3 from both sides to get rid of the 3 on the right hand side, which will then give us 0. So we now have x squared, take away x, take away 2. So it is going to be two numbers to times to give you -2, and sum of those two numbers will give a -1 because the coefficient of x is -1. So by coefficient, I mean the number in front of x, that times to give you the value. So x plus 1, x minus 2 is equal to 0. And by solving these, we can find out the first x is going to be -1 and the second one is going to be 2, or the other way. So now that we've found the x values, what we are going to do is, which I'm sure the majority of you are pretty much guessing what we need to be doing, we are going to pick one of these equations, and which in this case I picked the second one, substitute the x values to find out what the y is going to be. So for when x is equal to -1, we have y is equal to -1 plus 3, which will give us 2. So the first pair of coordinates we have that's intersecting is going to be -1 and 2. And the second pair, in order for us to find out the second one, we need to say when x is equal to 2, because that was the second x value, we have y is equal to 2 plus 3. That gives us 5. Therefore, the solutions are -1, 2, and 2, 5, which if they ask you to write it down as a coordinate, I would expect everyone to write this down. So remember, x is first, y is next. Right, for this question, two equations given to us. I'm going to model this for you as well. So you just watch what we are doing and then you can copy it down by pausing the video if you're watching the video. Or if you're on the lesson online, that's absolutely fine. You can make notes after I finish this. I am going to share this video with everyone, so don't worry about making the notes at the moment. Just watch what I'm doing, pause the video, and then you can write it down later. So y is equal to 2x squared plus 6x plus 4, and we have y is equal to -9x, -24. So we have a quadratic with a linear. So what we can say is, if they are both equal to y, they are equal to each other then. So I can clearly say that -9x, -24 is going to be equal to 2x squared plus 6x plus 4. There is a quadratic here. We can clearly see there's an x squared. So that means this needs to equal to 0. So we need to manipulate the equation so that it equals to 0 for us to be able to factorize and solve. So what we did, we added 9x to both sides, which gave us 2x squared plus 15x, and we added 24 to both sides again to end up with the plus 28. So we're now going to solve to find x. So to solve to find x, we need to factorize this. You need to be very good at factorizing where the coefficient of x squared is greater than 1. So 2x times x is going to give you 2x squared, and 7 times 4 will give us 28. And if I write it down in this format, which is 2x plus 7, x plus 4, this will expand to give us 2x squared plus 15x plus 28. Now, to solve this, we should be able to equate each of these brackets to a 0. So if I say 2x plus 7 is equal to 0, you will then take 7 away from both sides and divide it by 2. That's where the -7 out of 2 comes from. And if I equate the second bracket into a 0, that's going to be x plus 4 is equal to 0. You will then take 4 away from both sides. That's going to give you the -4. So we now need to substitute to find corresponding y values for all of these x's. So we've got two x values here. So we need to substitute it into one of the equations that we need to pick and substitute into it and find out what the y values are going to be. So if I pick the second one, which is y is equal to -9x minus 24, you are going to be substituting the -7 out of 2 into x, which will give you 63 out of 2 take away 24, which is half of 15. And if I substitute the -4 in, remember -9 times -4, because you're simply substituting in -4 here. So that's going to be -9 times -4. That's 36. Take away 24. That's going to be 12. Solve the following quadratic simultaneous equation, and they give us one quadratic, one linear equation where y's are equal to each other. So when both equations are given in terms of y, we can make one as equal to 2. So the first equation equal to the second equation. So x squared plus x minus 2 is equal to 2x plus 4. Remember 2x plus 4 is there, so we just need to get rid of those. We need to balance the equation by rearranging to make sure that the equation is equal to 0, so then we can factorize and solve. So rearrange to make the equation equal to 0. So we're going to take 2x and 4 away from both sides, which is going to be x squared plus x. Take away 2x, we've got the negative 2 there, and then we are going to take 4 away from it, which is going to equal to 0. Now, x squared minus x minus 6 is equal to 0. This is when I rearranged everything. So then this is now going to be my turn to factorize this and solve it for x. So I want two numbers to times to give me negative 6 and add to give me a negative x. So that's going to give me negative 3 and positive 2. Negative 3 times positive 2 is negative 6. And negative 3 plus 2 is going to give you a negative 1. So we make both of the equations equal to 0, so both of the brackets, sorry, so that's going to be an equation. It creates an equation, so then you're going to add 3 to both sides and then take away 2 from both sides, which then will give you the x-axis for the first and the second one. So you've got 3 and negative 2. Now we need to substitute these into the second equation, which is the simpler one. So when you do 2 times 3 plus 4, that's going to give you 10. When you do 2 times negative 2 plus 4, that is going to give you 0. So then you will need to write these down as a coordinate, because usually they ask you to write it as a coordinate. So that's going to be 3 for the x, 10 for the y, and negative 2 for the x, 0 for the y. Okay. Right, so we are very likely to end up with a question like this, and this was something that I was talking to you guys about, where you are going to be given a linear equation along with an equation of a circle. Equation of a circle is in the form of x squared plus y squared equals radius squared, and it's the second one given to us. So we know that the first equation can be substituted in here, because if y is equal to x plus 1, I can then substitute that into this to find out what my x-axis is going to be. So substituting equation 1 into equation number 2 is going to look something like this. And one thing we need to remember is that this section here is the same thing as x plus 1 and x plus 1 expanded. So when we expand the bracket, that's going to give us x squared plus 2x plus 1 is equal to 13. Collecting the like terms will give us 2x squared plus 2x plus 1. But now we know we need to make sure that this is equal to 0, because we can't factorize it otherwise. So we need to take 13 away from both sides. 2x squared plus 2x minus 12 is going to be 0. Now, all of these numbers are divisible by 2. So if I divide all of them by 2, it's going to make my life easier to factorize this and find out the x-axis. So x plus 3, x minus 2, because I want two numbers to times to give me a negative 6 and add to give me a positive 1. And positive 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Positive 3 negative 2 is positive 1. So when we solve these, remember we're going to equate each bracket into a 0. That's going to give us x is equal to negative 3 or x is equal to 2. What we're then going to be doing is to just substitute these values into our y. So if y is x plus 1, then if I substitute negative 3, the y is going to be negative 2. So when x is negative 3, y is negative 2, and the coordinate of that is going to be this. And for the next one, when x is equal to 2, then y is going to be 2 plus 1, which is a 3, and the coordinate of that is going to be written down like this. Right, so for today's session, this is going to be the final question we are going to be going through, and it's going to be a challenge question. And one thing that we need to remind ourselves is that when we look at this question, we can clearly see that we need to rearrange something to be able to substitute into the first equation. So you can either make x the subject for the second. This is the first, this is the second equation. You can either make x the subject for the second equation or y the subject for the second equation and substitute it back into the first one. They both will give you the same answer in the end. So when I numbered them, what I did for rearranging, I made x the subject for this one. So I took y away from both sides from the second equation. That gave me x is equal to 3 minus y. So substitute for x into equation 1. So instead of x, you are now going to be substituting 3 minus y into the x for the first equation. So when we do that, this is what we are going to end up with, and we need to remember 3 minus y squared is the same thing as 3 minus y and 3 minus y multiplied together, so you're expanding a bracket there. So when we expand the bracket, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times y is negative 3y, and then you've got another negative 3y, and then you've got y squared. And when we collect the like terms, in the end we are going to end up with 2y squared, take away 6y plus 9 equal to 5, and then we need to take 5 away from both sides to make sure this is equating to a 0. Again, this is divisible by 2 to get rid of the coefficient of y squared. So we can divide all of those numbers by 2. That's going to give us y squared minus 3y plus 2. And that is equal to 0. We're going to factorize this now. We want two numbers to times to give us 2 and add to give us negative 3. So it's going to be y minus 1, y minus 2 is equal to 0 because minus 1 times minus 2 is a positive 2 and minus 1 minus 2 is a negative 3. So we make both of these brackets equal to 0 and find out that the y for the first one is going to be 1 and the second one is going to be 2. We then substitute these back into one of the original equations to find x. It doesn't matter which one, and you will be able to end up with this answer. So when we write it down as a coordinate, we need to be careful. X first, then y, and then x first, then y. So well done for today's session, and see you guys next week.